The rate of change is causing burnout. People are stressed, they're tired, they're overwhelmed. We cannot keep doing this wrong.
Hi everyone, I'm Julia Lefevre, and around here we talk about leading with clarity, rewiring our mindset, and growing from the inside out. So let me ask you something. What if the most powerful change you could lead starts not with a new plan, but with who you are? So today's guest, Nissi Ozigbu, has built her career helping leaders answer that question. As a coach, consultant, and speaker, she champions integrated leadership, where who you are, what you believe, and how you lead are fully aligned. Storytelling is at the heart of her work. Whether she's on stage, in the boardroom, or in a one-on-one, Nissi helps leaders connect the dots between their past and their presence, their values and their voice, their identity and their impact. Change is coming, ready or not. The real question is, will you lead it without losing yourself or your team? Nissi, welcome. I'm so glad you are here. I am so excited to hear what you have to say on this topic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to have this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, Nissi and I met on LinkedIn. We found ourselves in some common spaces, and it has just been such a joy to get to know you. And I wanted to just start our conversation with a confession. So a year ago, I was just entering into this whole LinkedIn world and just starting to kind of become familiar with more of the business world and so on. And I kept seeing all of these titles called change managers. And my confession is that I had no idea what that was. I'm sure I'm the only person in the whole world that was ignorant about this, but just in case there are others, would you just share a little bit? What is a change manager?
Absolutely. And first of all, just to reassure you, so it's more common that people don't know what we do than they do. And
Okay.
actually, what you see is there's a lot of misconceptions around what we do as well. So a lot of
Hmm.
people think they know what change managers do, and that's usually, oh, okay, change manager. They're here to do communication and training on a project within a corporate space, when actually our role is so much broader than that. Good change manager, a great change manager will work within your project and program spaces. So whenever an organization is going through a transformation, that's where you'll find a change manager. And actually our role is to like examine and dig deep into the landscape and look into how do we make sure that the environment is created to make this change sustainable. So obviously communication and training is a large part of that. If you're going to take people from A to B, B to C, whatever it might be, they need to know what's going on, they need to be skilled in order to do it. But you also need to have a look at the processes, the policies, the stories that are being told within the organization explicitly and implicitly, so that when you are putting in a change, all of that, which we usually call the culture of the organization,
Mhm.
isn't working against what you're doing.
That sounds like a really hard job because most people that I know, they don't like change. And so I'm just curious, how do you, yeah, where do you even start?
So the beautiful thing and why I'm in change 15 years later is you start with conversations. People don't like change. Number one, if they don't have any control over it. Number two,
Mhm.
if they can't see themselves in it. Number three, if they don't see any benefit for themselves. But if I told you now, Julia, I'm going to give you £1 million, that's a change. Are you not going to like it? I don't know. I feel like maybe you would.
I would love it.
Exactly. The blanket that people don't like change, it depends, and so it's
Hmm.
about understanding what those different levers are and how do we create their environment so that people see this as a positive change and something that they want to do usually. And why there's
Mm.
change has a bad rep is because people don't pay attention to those levers, and so change is introduced as a threat. And
Mhm.
then that then sets people on guard, and you'll know from your neuroscience space what that does to the body, the mind, and how everything shuts down. And That's what usually happens. So change isn't introduced properly, and then there's this narrative of actually change is bad, it's scary, we don't like it.
Wow. And, as you're just kind of explaining some of this, I'm thinking, what a gift to an organization to bring a change manager in, because if everyone has their role, they're busy doing their job. And when you bring a new change in, whether it's, I'm assuming most of the changes are technology upgrades, maybe, or are there other types of changes that you work with?
Yep. So the biggest spectrum that you can think of. So you've got policy changes, you've got
Okay.
culture changes where organizations are going through a rebrand, new marketing. You've got operating model changes, so where teams are being reorganized and processes are being moved. And so there's a wide spectrum of change. What we are seeing now is technology is driving a lot of that, i.e., if you introduce a new system that's automating processes,
Mhm.
you'll then have to reimagine the way the team works, which then means you need to reimagine the culture. So also there's this whole interconnected ecosystem of change. And people go wrong when they think, actually, we're just introducing tech. It's never just tech, because what does
Mhm.
that tech link to? And that's the role of a change manager, to stand beside you and partner with you and say, hold on a minute, let's have a look at the ripple effect of this one change across the rest of your organization.
So it really is kind of having a 100-foot view of being able to see the whole process where one thing comes and the domino effects,
Yeah,
and being able to prepare people for that.
exactly that.
Yeah. So what do you feel like is the most difficult part of your job?
Funny enough, it's the intro that we just started with, people understanding what the job is, because usually change managers are brought in at the midnight hour, and at the midnight hour is not when you want somebody to be saying, step back a minute. It's just like this. Let's just do it. Tell me what I need to tell the people. Let's get the people trained. And so when you're brought into environments like that, you also have to be quite strategic and balanced. On the one hand, this business has to deliver what they said they would. So you have to partner with them to do that. At the same time, you want to be building the capability so that going forward, they don't make the same mistake. The reason why I do what I do is because currently we're seeing within organizations, and this is globally, the rate of change is causing burnout. People are stressed, they're tired, they're overwhelmed. We cannot keep doing this wrong. We're like, okay, once a year, then we go through this painful thing. Now it's every single day. You cannot be putting people through life changing surgery every single day and expecting them to cope and be better the next time. All you're doing is you're making them weaker and weaker and weaker and more tired each
Mhm.
time. So, my goal and the goal you'll see within the change management community, there's a big push in terms of building change management capability and understanding and competency so that more people understand what we do. We're brought in earlier. And then over the years, you'll see this gradual movement of change being embraced in organizations.
Okay, well, you just moved into my love language when it's coming to this, that we're now aiming for capability, for capacity, for the change muscles,
Yeah,
so to say, instead of just getting people through it. We're trying to really equip them with the presence,
yes,
the regulation abilities, and this is the work that this is where we kind of overlap, because this is where knowing and understanding how our brains work. And and the beautiful thing is that what we're finding is that people have much more potential for growing their capacity for change than we've ever realized before. And we're learning more and more about how that works. So,
absolutely.
yeah, I love that. Well, before we keep, part of what Wired to Lead is for is to be able to just highlight different leaders and recognize the truth that we are often wired to lead in certain ways. And so, leaders who have found some success, we want to be able to highlight that, but also to be able to tie their current success to what experiences in the past have wired you for this, because that's what we're finding is that our capacities are directly tied to our experiences. And so I'm just curious, how did you get to this place? And just tell us a little bit of your leadership journey, and we'll just go from there.
This is great. So this is exactly what I'm about as well, because I believe that if you're going to lead people through change, they need to trust you, and trust is
Mm.
built via authenticity and people understanding who you are and knowing like your story and your makeup. So I love this. That said, let me tell you a bit about. I got into change management because of my love of stories, and I think you and I both studied literature. Am I?
We did. It was crazy to find that.
And so the reason I love stories so much is because of how it gives you that ability to kind of go to different worlds and different places and walk in different people's shoes and expose you to what you wouldn't be able to maybe physically. But we know that our brains are really, really powerful. And in some instances, my understanding is your brain can't tell the difference between an imagined experience, if it's kind of rerun, and an actual experience, you know? And so that love of stories led me to study literature. And I was thinking, well, what am I going to do with this? And then I got my first job and it was in sales. And obviously, within sales, storytelling is incredibly powerful. I was working at a property investment company that was transitioning to a state agency, the director, great salesman, and I saw how stories were so powerful in the business context, and especially for the transition. But it was a small organization. I worked there for 2 years. I helped with their designing their new target operating model, putting in place a new website, a new CRM. At that time, I didn't know that change management and project management were jobs, but somewhere along the way, I got that exposure. I can't remember exactly where. Anyway, so from there, I my next position was as an operations manager at Financial Ombudsman Service. That's a regulator here in the UK. And at the time, the Ombudsman Service was doing this massive digital transformation from paper to e-file. Now, as an operations manager, you have your own team that you manage. I was managing about 15 people, but they also gave me training in change management and project management. So that's where I got my first formal qualification in projects and change management. So super early on in my career, I was kind of 23, managing a team in financial services, had this great training, really great leaders at the time who believed in me and poured so much into me. And I think that's also what enabled me to accelerate my journey. From then on, I've pretty much worked in change management forever and always. Half of my career has been in financial services. The other half of my career has been in just random things: oil and gas, engineering, large tech consultancies, small independent consultancy. I've led my own, well, I started one of the first change teams at the National and Savings and Investment Bank here. So that's our National Bonds Bank here in the UK. But then for that whole time, so across about a 10-year period, what I saw is that this understanding of change management was very limited. And every time I'd go into an organization and I'm having to kind of prove my worth, explain my value. So 4 years ago, I made a decision to step out independently and start building this change management capability, sharing with people, why is it you need a change manager, or what value do we bring? I just share with you one kind of tipping point within that time. I feel like it's so cliche, but becoming a mum. I also became a mum quite young as well. Well, it's really young is relative, 27. Look back, I think it was young. At the time, I didn't feel like I was young.
Yes, I agree. We think we know it all when we're that age.
Exactly, yeah. And so, having started my career in financial services and selling, the property background, I was very kind of black and white, very hardline, very target driven. This is what we're doing, whatever the cost. And then I was pregnant with my first child. And for whatever reason, I don't know how this happens, because I know a lot of people who are kind of female CEOs or female leaders, they also talk about motherhood transforming their leadership style. But for me, how that manifested was I was pregnant and I found performance management really, really hard. I started thinking, this is somebody's child. How would I feel if somebody was to treat my child like that? Now, that's a warning, a red flag, because, well, how am I treating people that I have to stop and think, well, this is somebody's child. Why wasn't I thinking this way before? And
Right.
two, well, what's brought me here? Because it's not like I'm an inherently wicked person. So how am I showing up at work, which doesn't align to who I fundamentally believe I am and how I should be treating people? And so during that period of being pregnant and giving birth, that's when I started to understand that actually you can have, such a soft and compassionate heart and still have really high standards. The two can coexist. It's not one or the other. Whereas before I was very kind of binary, I had a fixed mindset around what performance management looked like, what leadership looks like. But motherhood has made that so much more fluid. And now I'm like, well, do you know what? Leadership is you leading in whatever sphere you're in from who you are, as opposed to trying to slip into these binary and very rigid definitions.
Wow. And don't you think that that's part of the difficulty with the business world right now is that so many organizations forget that it's people that are working for them, and we become so focused on the production,
Yeah.
the performance, that we miss, yeah, these are, and I think the interesting piece of this is, and I'll bring out my fun little brain model now, is that is that the problem is that our prefrontal cortex is the smartest part of our brain. So when we're evaluating people, we're evaluating them based on that part, like how their prefrontal cortex is performing in action. Problem is that when there's an evaluation and there's critique, what it does is it triggers fear or shame in our subconscious, which then hijacks your smart brain and keeps you from being able to perform well. And so, when you can have an integrated approach, because our brains work from the bottom up, not the top down. And so, when you can address the relational need first, in other words, the human parts of people, our human need for safety, connection, belonging is just as important as having food and water. And if we can, as leaders, address that and fulfill that, help our people to feel safe relationally, regardless of their performance, it will actually energize their prefrontal cortex, their smart brain, and they'll produce more. And so that just plays into exactly what you started discovering, I imagine.
Massively, because I think once you're able to also like drop the pretense, there's something that happens kind of in your body, your mind. You relax, you connect with people deeper, you're able to have conversations that are so much more real and constructive, and people really let you into their pain points because they're not feeling the need to protect themselves. You're talking about, protection and belonging. So absolutely.
Uh, yeah. So, one of the things that we started talking about before we hit record, and I said, hold on, we need to stop and start recording, is just the reality that the doors are being opened in HR, and HR companies or divisions are recognizing the value of bringing in change managers. And yet, what is the biggest obstacle to being able to help an overall organization by offering your services?
So the biggest obstacle is the support is coming at the wrong level. And what I mean by that is change management really, in order for it to succeed, needs to be a capability that's developed from the inside out, from senior leaders, junior staff. Everybody needs to get on board. At the same time, when you have more junior members of staff, they need to see that change management capability kind of role modeled and kind of thought out and stepped through from their senior leaders in the everyday moments. Otherwise, they don't prioritize it. It's kind of just seen as this other thing. So, one of the biggest challenges now is getting change managers functioning and having dialogue at the right level. And I'm talking about meaningful dialogue. Yes, you'll have change managers going to board meetings and people will say, oh, I've got senior leadership exposure there. But yeah, a 5 minute, 2 bullet point update is not the exposure that I'm talking about. You're talking about building relationships, coaching these senior leaders, helping them to kind of reshape their priorities and reimagine how they show up so that they can embody. And it's such a cliche, but so that they can be the change. If all of that's not happening, change just becomes another tick box exercise where me, who's on the outside, really, I'm not the one who's going to live through that change. It's kind of like, okay, I've enjoyed what you've had to say, but so what? That so what has to be leaders role modeling the change, talking about change management, just as involved in equipping their organizations to lead through change. So yeah, that's the biggest challenge at the moment.
Isn't it interesting? It's almost like a change manager's biggest job is to change how the senior leader sees the process or
Exactly.
sees the change, and maybe even to invite them into the story of change in a way that's compelling and that they buy in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how have you found success in doing that? How does that work?
It's a multi-channel approach. That's what I would say. So, um, the number one is confidence. It's such an kind of underrated thing, and the reason why I say that is because you need to be bold enough to push back and to take up space. If you are more than happy to kind of just go through the tick box exercise and do what people are telling you to do, because also oftentimes change is seen as a line in a project plan. Now, for you and I, that sounds a bit crazy. How can real change be one line in a project plan? We know that that's not feasible, but for people within the transformation space, especially if they have got tight deadlines and they need kind of KPIs to tick off against, they want to be able to say, we've produced a communication plan, we've produced an engagement plan, we've done the training, but you can do all of that and nothing shifts in the culture. We know that, right? So one of the ways is to form better relationships with my program and project management teams to understand I'm more than happy to give you your deliverables on your project plan, but you also need to give me room to move kind of broader than that. That access to stakeholders, being happy for me to take up senior leadership time. So what that looks like is usually a project manager will meet with exec teams at least once a week. That time
Mhm.
should be shared. Okay, let's spend half of the time looking at the operational and the tactical, and the other half looking at the strategic and the relational. Because without all those four elements, actively firing, we are not going to get the return on investment that we will hope. You'll deliver the project, so you'll go live, but adoption will tank and you will not get your return on investment. Absolutely not. It's not going to happen. So that's number one. Number two is being bold enough once you get that time with the senior leaders to be able to kind of constructively feed into the conversation. So you don't just go there and be like, yes, this project plan is great. You're doing everything as you were supposed to. No, it's pushing back. Okay. So I can see from your diary, you only spend 1 hour every 3 months with operational teams. How exactly are they going to see you role modeling the change? Not everybody is confident enough to push back and have those conversations. Yeah.
And
So
I'm always sad because this is a podcast, and so we do put it out on YouTube, and so some of the YouTube viewers get to see our faces. But as Nissi was saying that, I was like, my face was expressing itself for two reasons because I thought, one, yeah, like that has to be spoken, and how many people are going to have the confidence to be able to lean in and be that clear.
yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely. And then the third one is just about generally building relationships. So also you as a change manager, you need to be close enough to the operational teams to really understand what it is that they do, what it is that's changing, and that's two pronged. So that number one, you're giving your senior leaders advice based on kind of real life experiences. You want to make it that when they show up, it is meaningful. It's not tokenism. It's not just, oh, I turned up and the team couldn't understand why I was there because I didn't show up at an appropriate time.
right.
You want to make sure that you're slotting them in places that it really makes sense. And
Yeah.
in order for you to do that, you need to be close enough to the operational teams and understand their daily rhythms, but also so that you can build those relationships. One thing I can guarantee you when you're going through any transformation is things will get hard, things will get tricky. People are going to lose things. Not everything is going to be great. They will lose functionality, or they'll lose certain freedoms, or they'll relationships will change, or processes will mean that their routines are disrupted. And all of that feels like a personal attack. It's not, but it feels like a personal attack. And you want to make sure that you've got the relationship in place, that when you're having those hard conversations, your presence is comforting and not threatening. Like, we're in this. We get that Nisi completely understands what we're going through. She knows our processes, and she wouldn't be talking to us about this and what it's going to mean if it was just going to be harmful. She gets the big picture. She knows it's painful. We're still doing it, and we trust her. If you haven't spent enough time with the teams, your very presence then just becomes threatening, because then you're only showing up when you're telling them something bad.
I love that you just went here because, yeah, when people are experiencing pain, they want it to stop. And so they go into fix it mode, maybe attack mode, because they're like, I don't like this. Let's stop it quick. What can I do to feel better? And if the change manager gets triggered by those
Yeah.
stress responses, it just creates a cycle. And yet I hear you saying that, being able to have this level of confidence at all these different levels, to confidence to step into spaces, confidence to speak into hard situations, and then the confidence and the presence to be able to stay regulated when everything feels like it's kind of coming unraveled. And so, again, part of what we're exploring here on Wired to Lead is what experiences in the past have helped you build that capacity in your own life, because we're not born with that capacity. And sometimes we learn it through success and sometimes we learn it through failure. But I'm just curious, what experiences in the past have helped you to stay regulated today when everything kind of seems like a big mess?
So getting it wrong and being dysregulated probably been my biggest learning curve. So thankfully, I had a lot of these experiences quite early on. When I had my first role as an operations manager, I was very, as I get said, and this is pre-pregnancy, I was very much, this is my plan, this is what I need to do. Tell, like, I'm going to tell you what to do. And my team pushed back really heavily. I got terrible 360 feedback, about how I'm not very flexible. Everything has to be done my way. And that was really, really painful. You can imagine. It just felt like an attack. Like, why can't they see that I want the best for them, especially when we're in a target driven environment? And then I had some coaching from my manager at the time, who was also actually a female leader. And she said, look, if you can step away from the emotion of this, look at what they are saying and lean into that, so try a different approach. The worst that can happen is you're right back where you are. Like, you're on ground zero now. They're saying you're terrible at what you're doing.
Thanks. And I imagine that was a shock to you, because at the time you would have thought, but look, we're hitting our goals, or we're performing.
Yeah.
And yet the personal piece, you're like, okay, I'm terrible at this.
Exactly. So, sitting with those feelings of discomfort and betrayal in a way, because remember, this is my team. That was my team. So sitting with those feelings of discomfort, betrayal, humiliation, like when you're being told all of those, and just digging deep into, well, what does it mean? And actually, what's the ultimate aim here? So is it for me to have my ego intact? Or is it for me to build a team who are able to work really well together, who respect me, and who are able to shape better outcomes because I'm drawing upon their collective excellence, which also means that maybe I don't need to work as hard to prove myself. It's about collectively us winning. And so that moment was pivotal for me, because number one, I learned to separate my feelings from kind of like the feedback that I was getting. And not to say that I've become unemotional. Obviously, when you get feedback, it's still really painful. But but to not let that cloud my judgment. You can have the pain, have the sting, and then lean into, but actually what's being said here. And if we're able to correct some of these things, what's going to happen in the long run. So that has helped me to show up now as, a way stronger change manager and change leader in helping other people to go through that process. I think maybe if I had, nailed it from the beginning, I wouldn't be able to empathize with, you're going to announce these changes. It's going to suck because you're going to feel betrayed when your team are going to push back. But that's just part of it's part of the journey. When you get through to the other side, and your team will work a lot better. You'll have more respect for your team and for yourself, and you'll have better outcomes for your organization. So yeah, that's really, really helped it. I try to encourage that feedback going forward now. Now I'm really actually excited, I would even say, for more constructive feedback, because I know how much better it makes you going forward. And I guess, in the sports world, they already know this. Like when you're training, your coach will tell you all the things you're doing bad or that are not as great, so that you can refine your technique and approach. Somewhere along the line in the corporate space, that has been kind of aligned with, actually you're not doing a good job, as opposed to you've got the potential to be great.
I believe in you.
Exactly. That reframing is really, really powerful.
Well, and because our brains are so attuned to people's postures toward us, we weigh that so much more even than the words that are said.
Yeah.
And so I imagine, as I listen to you tell your story, that your boss, who, kind of said, well, let's look at this, her being able to be present with you.
Yes.
While she saw all of your failures, and yet her posture toward you was still, I believe in you, and let's look at this because I'm pretty sure you can grow from this.
Yeah.
So it really, earlier in our conversation, you said, you had to learn that it's people and performance, and you don't have to give up one for the other. Yeah. She didn't have to coddle you and say, oh, Nissi, and yeah, they just don't know what they're talking about. And she didn't have to just say, you need to look at this. If you can't look at this, then you need to leave. She modeled what it looks like to integrate both, to be present with in a failure, and to say, and I believe that you can do better. And so that's really what I hear you saying, that experience with her has now helped you to have the capacity to do it with the people that you interact with.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the things that I want to help our listeners remember or recognize, is that some of us have been lucky to have those experiences. So yeah, it comes through failure, and we have a really great boss who was able to model kind of a different way to see failure. And there are some of us who didn't have that. And so, they may feel like, well, I've never experienced that. And so, at the end of the day, I cannot step into a space because I do not have the confidence to make space, or I do not have the confidence. And I would just tell them, you don't have it yet. But what you can do is you can proactively find interactions and experiences where someone can do that for you. And we're never left to just what life gives us. We do have agency to be able to invite people into that. And you even said, now I'm looking forward to 360s. And I even see you still proactively inviting feedback in a way that is helping you. What if the real measure of our leadership, especially during change, isn't so much about what we achieve, but about how we show up?
Yeah.
Because that's going to have an exponential effect. How have you seen that to play out?
Absolutely. So The way that I've seen it play out is number one, and I'll focus it in from a kind of change leadership perspective here, is I'm in an organization, and I'll talk about organizations that I've been in for a number of years. So it might be that when I'm first brought on board, I'm having to do everything. I'm having to explain that when you're introducing a change, there's all these different aspects, people, process, data, information. Have you tracked the changes across all of them? Have you done this? Have you done that? Like your hand holding them through every single step. And not easily. It's kind of like you're having to push your way into all of those conversations. And it's very uncomfortable for people. They're feeling like, why are you broadening my scope? It's just this that I wanted to do. You're now making it all about X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, no, it's not me making it about X, Y, and Z. It's always been about all of these things. If you're choosing not to see, it's different. And the step change that I see is by the time we're moving into the next phase of the project, or it might be a completely new project entirely, instead of them coming to me and saying, can you create comms and training for this? And then I'm having to broaden. They're saying, look, we can see that there's going to be impacts across all these areas. Can you work with us in terms of forming the relationships and doing the groundwork to make sure that we understand what those impacts mean? Keep going through and through how that transition kind of manifests in that deeper knowledge and understanding. So that's one of the ways, just in terms of from a process point of view, people understand those impacts. Another thing that you see is people being more present. So, and what I mean by that is for changes, what you can have is you've got a project team. And what usually happens is as you go along, attendance drops, because people see that meeting as a ticking exercise, like, oh, I come here, I say hello, and I go. Once people understand that actually who you are, well, number one, you've been invited into this conversation because you have a very unique perspective that is going to help kind of craft and shape this change going forward. And that mental kind of switch for people means that we're seeing less of that dip, or if people are not able to attend, they're letting you know beforehand and saying, look, I'm not able to come along, but can you send me the papers so that I can feed in my comments, because I know you're going to want to hear my voice in this conversation. So people understanding that their voice carries weight during change and that nobody is there as a kind of tick box exercise. So those are kind of the two most powerful kind of practical shifts that I'm seeing in the space.
I so agree, and what's driving, I think, a lot of this, and one of the things that you've implied is that when you create a sense of authentic relational connection, when you're meeting that need for people to belong, to matter, then they're drawn in and they want to be a part of that. And so, what a beautiful thing to aspire to as a change leader. Well, before we close, I just want you to have a chance to tell us about what you're doing currently. If anyone, tell us about what you're doing and who you're helping. And if people who are listening and they're like, oh, I just want to learn more, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So the easiest way to get hold of me is probably via LinkedIn. I'm Nissi Ozigbu on there. Otherwise, there's my website, thegrowthhut.co.uk. And what we're doing through the Growth Hut is to give change makers, and the reason why I say change makers is because number one, the role of managing and leading change goes way beyond a change manager. Just in case I haven't made that clear enough, it goes way beyond. So anybody who is making change in an organization, and I would argue that's everyone, we all have a role to play within making change in an organization, but we all don't necessarily have the skills or haven't built those skills in order to do so. Or sometimes we have the skills, but we're lacking the confidence. We want safe space to kind of exercise those and to get that training. What you're talking about, me having my manager who was able to sit with me and coach me through that experience. Some of us don't have that. So the Confident Changemaker program is that space for people to come together with a kind of like-minded professionals and myself to gain the skills and the confidence to trust your voice, to challenge professionally and profoundly, to shape the conversations within your organization so that change is more meaningful and sustainable. So that's kind of an online program on demand. You can do it anywhere, anytime. So that's one side of the work that I do. But the other side is actually going into organizations and partnering with your chief execs, with your senior management team to build that understanding of actually this is your role within change, how to kind of demask yourself. One of the things that I say is when I work with senior leaders one to one, they're filled with so much color and joy and they're so interesting. And then I see them on town hall or all hands meetings and all the color's been drained. They become this really bad professional archetype, and I'm wondering what are you doing to help them to break out of that really kind of toxic pattern,
Mm.
all the reasons that we've just mentioned around when they're showing up in ways that are inauthentic. It doesn't give other people permission to be themselves. It evokes threat responses in other people, so that they are embodying that, creating kind of safe spaces. So I partner with organizations to do that. So yeah, would love to have conversations with anybody interested.
Awesome. Well, we will put all of those links in the show notes. And yeah, just thank you so much for being here. It has been so fun to connect again for a whole 45 minutes. And we just wish you all the best. Thank you for sharing your personal stories and getting vulnerable and just showing up as you are.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing in this space. I love what you do on LinkedIn. I find all your information so helpful and so informative, and it's constantly reshaping the way that I think as well. So just thank you for being a wonderful change maker.
Oh, you are welcome. Well, thanks, everyone. We will see you next time. Thanks for listening to Wired to Lead. If this helped you lead with more clarity today, hit follow in your app so you never miss an episode, and leave a short review in Apple Podcasts. 2 sentences is perfect, and it helps leaders like you to find us. If you're a leader who would like to explore opportunities for workshops or coaching with Brave Restoration, please reach out to our website at www.braverestoration.org. We would love to hear from you. See you next time.